So welcome everybody. This is a brand new unit. I'm Vicky Hanna, it's Certificate 4 in Youth Work, and we are going to be doing CHCDFV001. We are doing domestic family violence. Okay, so let me just share my screen. Looking to do chalk and talk. You've got a copy of slides and you've got a pre-recording for this unit. However, I have modified these slides to be able to, just for us to be able to work off tonight. Let me just make this look a little bigger. Okay, guys, it's a little bit of tech. Hey, wow. Sorry, I'll just get rid of that black line for you. Okay, fantastic. So recognise and respond appropriately to domestic family violence. I'd really like if someone would do our acknowledgement to country tonight, please. Who would be available to do that and happy to?
I'll do it.
Thank you.
It's the black square one. In the spirit of reconciliation, Hayter Institute of Education acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and study. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging.
Thank you so much. I'd like to extend our acknowledgement out to any of our learners who are part of First Nation or Torres Strait Island families, and those who may be watching the recording unable to join us tonight. So a little bit of housekeeping, Zoom etiquette. Camera's on, but please be comfortable. You are working from home and it is an adult class. But when we're in our sessions and in our breakout rooms, it's good to have that connection. It's also part of our skills development. I like to see you in class because if I'm assessing your role play, I can refer back to how you interact in our peer sessions. And I can go, I've seen this learner do that. I can say yes to that. So I can apply another method. Microphone's on mute because it picks up a lot of sound and we are recording, so I'd really appreciate that. Class break times, I'm not great at it. I'm neurodivergent, so I sometimes forget to stop, eat, drink water, do all those things. But please flag that. I want you to look after yourself, so a bit of self-care as well. Class participation, hand up. Thank you for that. Respectful relationships. What gets discussed in class is private and confidential. This is not a recording that goes out to people who are out in the public arena. Be mindful if you share a story to de-identify that. I know that even though I live in what's referred to as a city, I'd only need to say a first name and someone may be able to recognize that. I may even only share a part of a story, and we never really know what that means to the other person that's listening. So just be mindful of that and don't share that. So if you say, look, we covered something in class and it was great to unpack that, and the scenario was this, just frame it as third party. The client presented with this and depersonalize that. No smoking or vaping on camera, but of course it's your home and you're working from home. Just turn your camera off and be comfortable. If you've got to grab a bite to eat, do that as well. This is a unit that I must let you know about some of it can be a trigger if you have a lived experience, or if you have someone near and dear to you that has a lived experience. Domestic family violence can be something that, even as a worker with no experience or firsthand with this particular crime, we can read a story and we can be vicariously traumatized by that. And so our self-care is very important, and our language needs to be safe around there as well. So if you're feeling that this is pushing some buttons for you, manage yourself in that space. Just drop it in chat and say, hey, I might step out and I'm looking forward to the recording. And now that we are recording our live classes, as well as sending out your resource, you won't miss anything. And when you watch it back, you can pause and wait till you're feeling in a better space. And then be kind to yourself. So if ever there's anything that's sitting with you beyond classes, you can always call 13 11 14 or 13 Yarn, First Nation Torres Strait Island people, because Lifeline are used to students who are dealing with pressure and time management and juggling work and life, and anyone who is studying in the community sector, where we talk about things around your psychosocial patterns that we discuss with our clients' needs in here as well. So with this particular unit, it is session 1, week 1. And in week 1, what I want to cover is our role as youth workers, how we come across this unit, our work practices we may be required to do, and the jobs that we will be looking at, ourselves, our well-being, risks, our values, our own philosophies about domestic violence work, and then what are the service models for where you're working in the job that you're doing? What support processes and guidelines are there in place for us? So we have 3 assessments. Task 1 is a quiz or question answers, and we'll cover some of those tonight. I'd like to do an example. Is in the slides, and your pre-recordings. You'll get your resources from your learner guide and a little bit of your own research. Task 2 we will do in week 2, and that is your research project, and I will help you with that as well. And then task 3, there are 3 clients, 3 role plays, and all of those are clients that are experiencing some level of domestic family violence and their readiness to take action around that. So in week 3, we will be preparing for that decision-making process. And this can be done in class, or you can manage this yourself with other learners as well. But if you are ready and you would like to do role plays in week 3, I will only need to see you do 1 of those 3 clients to be satisfied for that. Okay, so our session is going to cover work practices, philosophies, and your supports that you will get in the workplace. It's also very important to know that even though this is a decade old, this data, then the economic cost to Australia was $22 billion a year, with victims and the community wearing and bearing that cost. So as a class, we're going to discuss what needs to be paid for, what kind of supports do you think should be covered in this space, what could we do as a community in regard to domestic and family violence supports. And for this, we're going to be covering a breakout room session. And if you would be good enough to take a snip of this page, just with your phone or a snip on your screen, you will need to have this page for your breakout room. Everyone will need to have these 5 questions. What are some of the myths about domestic family violence? What do you think as a group are the root causes or the triggers that set this off? Who are our clients and what support might they need? And what is our own worldview and the community views on domestic family violence? So this breakout room is a big one. This is 40 minutes you're going to be in there, but you've got those 5 questions and you need to be able to do a bit of a meet and greet and then stay on track. You're going to come out of your breakout room and you're going to give a summary. One person will be the spokesperson. And then you'll just check, have I represented everybody well? It can be helpful to have one person writing the notes or scribing as well. And you will need to, in your breakout room, find a local resource or a resource in your state or territory that you would refer a client to for domestic family violence support. Now, the one that I've left you here is called Edon Place, EDON. That is their website. But you may have another service that you would like. So has everybody got that snip? All good?
I have, yep.
Great, wonderful. Okay, so that's going to be our space. Now, I do not record. So just picking up from where we were, our whole class, our live class, is gone over into a breakout room. And in the breakout room, I've asked everyone to work as a team and come back with, after discussing, these 5 questions. So who is our client? And we need to have this underpinning knowledge. What are some of the myths about domestic family violence in our own knowledge that we're coming in with? What are some of the root causes of domestic family violence and or the triggers around them? What can set this off where that is the chosen coping mechanism? Who are our clients? Have a think about it. We're studying youth work, but who else might be our clients? Our primary client will always be the young person, and a young person is 12 to 24. For the purpose of our certificate. However, we know that we are working in early intervention space, 9 and 10 and 11 years of age. And we're also working with young parents, and that might be up to 35, Gen Y. That is considered a young parent, but they may have a child that's 10 or 12 or even a little older, and that's our early intervention work that we would be doing. So youth work is holistic. Of course, the most important connection for our clients is family or carers around them. That doesn't always mean it's safe for that relationship to be 24/7 under one roof. But even when we're working in child protection or child safety, depending on the state or territory that you're in, reunification remains the overall goal. Safe to do so. So safe, supported and supervised. Even if we go through a breakdown in the family unit, that collaboration between parenting, even different parenting styles, there can be a lot of conflict around that. Oftentimes when domestic family violence has been part of that young person's life, and we know that the science is there that in utero, that before a child is born, if they're subjected to domestic family violence, it is part of their imprint, their trauma. And we refer to that as CPTSD, which means it's complex. And complex post-traumatic stress disorder as a diagnosis is persistent and consistent over those developmental years for a young person. So we may, as a youth worker, see a behaviour, but the lens that we have over this space is what happened to you. So it may be acting out or a maladaptive coping mechanism, but what would be that root cause? And oftentimes it is about relationships with self and with others, and having them be healthy. What support might our client need? And what is our worldview and the community's view on domestic family violence? We'll hear the expression where police will go, look, we're not taking it to court because it is not in the public interest. We'll discuss that. We need to know. The public talk about it. If you are a neighbour to it, you can vicariously be triggered by domestic family violence. It can trigger a lot of thoughts around feel helpless to be able to help them. And a lot of people, it's just, I don't want to get involved. There's some great research out there. Unfortunately, it's escalating. In 2024, there were just under 400 deaths directly or indirectly related to domestic family violence. So that's murder. There's some suicides which have a backstory around that, or have been deemed a suicide but may not have been. And then there's single vehicle accidents as well. So when we work in this space, it's not gender specific. We have task 1, which is question and answers. And you'll note that it's not around one particular gender, and there's 8 if we're looking at biology, but who is our client? Describe the service that we would provide or the need that they would want to get support in, rather than male, female. But I am very mindful that there is a lot of exposure around that. I cannot strongly say enough to you that young males do need positive male role models as youth workers in this space. Predominantly, it was a very female centric sector, but youth work has become 50-50 now of males and females in that space. So social work, not as much, but definitely in youth work it is. So this is a specialty area that you work in. So when we refer to SMEs, subject matter experts, youth work is that area, because our clients may experience domestic family violence. Behind that could be mental health. It could be alcohol and other drugs. It could be housing and homelessness. It could be unemployed. But our client is that young person. And what are the things that impact a young person where we may see the behaviour, but there'll be an underlying issue? So tonight, everyone's in the breakout room coming back with their views as a team about those 5 questions. And then also, as a team, to research a service provider who you could refer a client to, who's a specialist in the area of domestic family violence. I've placed one that I work with regularly, and the services that they have, you can go to their website and explore that. Some people may have another one in their state or territory, and they'll bring that knowledge and information back. And we'll talk about, you know, what we liked about it, if there was something there that perhaps we learned about it and we weren't aware of before we jumped in to this space or had this discussion. So I'll jump out of there and everybody will come back and share their summary that you decided to research and come back with those 5 questions. So we're just coming back from breakout room and we're going to share our summary of findings. Hey, who'd like to start first? Great, Katie.
Can I go first? Oh, no, Megan.
Already got Katie in first up.
Okay, so we were group 3. We discussed all the questions and came up with some amazing answers. I think we ended up coming up with 7 main myths. So we had domestic violence is only physical, wrong. If it was really that bad, the person would leave. Domestic violence only happens to women, that's a huge one, and I'll talk about that in a minute because that's one of our services that we were researching. And then what are the root causes and or triggers for domestic violence? Oops. We came up with drug and alcohol generational, socioeconomic, and trauma and mental illness. And then who are our clients? So we've got young people, rich, poor, disabled, family members, and the actual abusers. The abusers seeking the help. What supports might they need? Emotional support, counselling, social services, housing or emergency care, and then tools and resources. With the last question, what is our worldwide view and community view on domestic family violence? One of them was, it's actually a private issue, and we discussed how that thinking, that concept is still around these days, but it's mainly in like smaller country towns. They still believe that what happens in the home stays in the home. And then for our services that we researched a heap, but I want to bring up this one because it's men experiencing domestic violence. So with everything that everyone in our group went away and researched separately, and then we came back and then we had a discussion about what we've researched and what services we'd found and what have you. Out of all of the services that we researched, we did not find one physical service that you can go into for men who are experiencing domestic violence. We could only find like 1-800-RESPECT, or it was more or less only services that were available online or over the phone, which is terrible. We spoke about that a fair bit, and we were discussing how we could change that, and, you know, that men need to start speaking up about it. And some of the views were kind of like, well, men believe that, you know, if they speak up about it, it means that they're not tough, manly. So yeah, it was an amazing discussion.
Great. That's I'm pleased to hear you went there with that. And even accessing supports, the police don't always receive that from the male
No.
in a respectful manner
Yeah.
as well. I appreciate that the laws are different in state and territory.
Yeah.
So and so is the collective group that you were in. So that was good. I'm glad you went there, and that everybody went out and found their own research, because you're just definitely going to need that. So
Yeah.
your group have identified an unmet need.
Absolutely.
And a gap in service provision. So that only changes when workers on the ground put a voice to it.
Yeah. So the two men in our group both stated that they'd prefer to work with your later teens so that they can then show them the appropriate behaviours.
Yes.
Sort of thing, which is amazing.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Thank you, Katie. Tessa, you had your hand up. Can I help you with something? Yeah. Did you want to ask Katie a question? Or?
I just wanted to sort of make a point to that, what she was saying about the lack of services that there are for males out there. And I know of some services that are actually, they've recognised this, but I wonder if it might be a cultural thing, because in New Zealand there's a Christian group that's started a foundation long ago called Man Up, and they actually, you know, encompass all of this around men and helping young men grow up. And they've got a program called there's a diamond group for girls, and there's also a group for boys, for young men, and it teaches them everything that, you know, we're learning to do. So I definitely recognize that lack of, you know, support out there for men, but there are some things coming up. And there is that support service out there. I've actually used them before a few years back. And so I wondered if, you know, that was maybe a cultural thing that we could look into, because it is a cultural community that's has those services out there, and they're actually all over New Zealand and Australia now.
Wonderful. That's really helpful. Thanks, Tessa. Appreciate that. Okay, another room. Talia.
All right. So our group, we were group number 2. Some of the myths we came up with were quite similar to the other group, but that it only involves physical violence. It only happens to people who are poor or uneducated, and that if it was so bad, then why don't they leave? That men can't be victims, and that only alcohol and drugs cause domestic violence. Some of the triggers that we came up with were stressful situations, unemployment, drugs and alcohol, maybe jealousy or possessiveness, cultural differences or spiritual differences, the lack of control that someone may be feeling, causing them to be violent, the values and beliefs, maybe pressure from family, generational trauma, or even maybe even like a certain anniversary or a date of something that could spark those emotions each year it comes around, or something like that. I guess their own trauma may make them feel violent, and maybe even social media, we thought, could bring on a lot of those things in relationships. So the clients that we thought, well, basically we realized that it's pretty much everyone can go through this, whether it's young people, young parents, even witnesses that are like, so a neighbor or something, I guess. What else? Clients as well, maybe even like repeat offenders, like they're trying to help themselves. People that could be in denial, I guess, of it, of how they've been acting. People that have been, maybe we thought someone maybe that had come out from jail and they're coming back into society. Even that could be quite triggering and hard for them. And the support, we've got counsellors, housing, financial, medical, safe houses. We've got parenting groups for parents that I guess have lost their sense of being able to be a parent, or even social groups, people that have lost their friends, support workers, education access, and even people that need help with their daily living. So like help with meals, basic hygiene, things like that. Community views, we've dated it back when it was normalized to have the cane at school, stuff like that. And that girls weren't punished, only men, that it could be gender-based. And again, the stigma and silence around it, that there needs to be a lot more support, the lack of like priority in cases like this. I guess like Katie, like, I guess what they were saying, that it just gets kind of pushed under the rug in some senses, or like in an instance where, say a girl had an issue and it was all male police, they tend to not take it as seriously, I guess, sometimes in some cases, and that people normalize it. Yeah. And that's what we really came up with. With the research, Chelsea was looking at the website that you provided, and I guess we were just Googling
Yeah.
stuff.
A good resource, and there's a lot of layers in what you shared there as well. So that's really good feedback. You've touched on from victim to offender as well, that intergenerational, and not everybody knowing that it is abuse that they're in receipt of because, well, they never hit me. So it was just all words, but we can have financial abuse, sexual abuse, we can have psychological abuse, we can have spiritual abuse, and of course the physical abuse. So domestic and family violence, the laws sit around it. It's not only partner to partner, it can be sibling to sibling, and it can also be a child to a parent as well. So there is a different law for elder abuse, but this can actually sit there, and it can be that the young person is at that tipping point and they act out without having that developmental to be able to understand what are the consequences with the thing that I made. Afterwards, perhaps it can be unpacked for them, but in that moment of time, they're either really heightened or really flat, and they're not in that window of tolerance. So that's the state of stress, the vicarious trauma or the triggering that happens. And so pressure and how people have become resilient or not about managing life circumstances and events and lashing out. And so we all have different ways of coping with things. So your work as a youth worker will be, first of all, to identify, do they understand what they're going through or what they are participating in? And we no longer use that cycle of violence because it implies that it just goes round and around. But there is some evidence around the participation of it. I know if I do this, this will happen, but I'm still going to do it anyway and tempt that, because on the other side of it can be the honeymoon phase. So it all blows up and then we're fine again. But then we start to map what is that cycle of violence based on the number of days. And so it could be once every 3 months, it could be once a month, but it could end up when we do assessment and intake, it's like, are you currently unsafe? Or when was the last time you felt unsafe? That's how we're assessing the risk around it. That's good work. So another group, please. Caitlin, thank you.
I can go for my group, which was group 5. Unfortunately, my camera isn't working tonight. That's why I'm not on camera. Right. So for the first 3 questions, we pretty much got what everyone has mentioned already. But for the 4th one about support, we just pointed a few. So like I mentioned one of the most important one is someone they can trust. Like they need to be, which can obviously be us. Like we need to build that trusting relationship with them for them to open up, so we know what sort of support they need. And those supports can be like legal assistance, counselling and emotional support, as well as financial support. They also may need like a shelter or a home to go to. Helplines are also good. And possibly if the victim decides to get in contact with family and friends again, their support. Some victims can be ashamed and not want to reach out to them. So that could be one thing, or not, but possibility. And then for the 5th question, the world views and community views, we pretty much discussed about raising awareness and how people perceive domestic violence. So you tend to go, for example, the ads on the TV, you'll see a few posters being hanged up around the community or shopping centres, as well as education and prevention, talking, at school or in a community centre, talking about that violence isn't acceptable and what to do if you're ever in that sort of situation. And one of the main things that we spoke about is that some can be negative and positive. Well, not so much negative or positive, but like for one example, we put that some communities don't talk about it as they think that that behavior is acceptable in some cultures. And due to that, some cultures have a lack of awareness or no support services. So it's yeah,
it can increase the risk as well, can't it? So yeah, really, all really good points. And also you're touching on that, the readiness to make the decision. So we can be, I'm not there yet. So on average, it takes 7 times to be able to formulate a safety plan and exit, because we need to be able to make sure that we are always open. So when we're working with a victim survivor of a serious violent crime, the 2 things that they come back with, and this is shared thinking, is 1, to be believed and acknowledge that what I'm going through is true for me. And the other is that I can keep coming back and accessing supports depending on where I'm up to in my plan. And those 2 things were very important. To feel shut down because haven't we been through this before? Even if it's unspoken, it's sensed, very acutely sensed by a victim survivor, because it's their life and their decision. They're weighing those things up around, I haven't got a plan yet. I haven't got the supports yet, and they may come back and speak to us many times, and you may refer them out to other service providers or give them the tools to be able to go and do that safely for when the time is right. So your safety plan could be mostly where your work is, not necessarily we can get you into emergency accommodation, because it's about the readiness of our client. However, no one's touched yet on mandatory reporting if we've got a child. So we'll see if any of the other rooms, that was good. Thank you, Caitlin. And another room, we've heard from 2, 3, and 5. So we've got 1 and 4.
Did room?
You're not sure of your room number, Di?
No, I think I'm number 3. Are we number 3? No, what number are we? Did we decide that I was spokesperson, or did we decide Lockie was, or Kurt?
No, I think we decided Kurt was.
Yeah, Kurt. Is Kurt gonna say?
Does Kurt knows this, or?
Yeah, I'm sure it was Kurt.
Yeah, I think he disappeared.
Is Kurt still there? Looks like he's
I
disappeared.
can't see him.
He might be elsewhere. I mean, I'm happy to start, and he can join in.
Sounds great.
We'll do it together, Diana.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
sounds good. Sounds good. I did actually just think of another myth, actually, that I haven't shared because it just occurred to me. But pretty much most of what has already been said. But we also got the one about people can't and won't change. It's just an anger issue. The victim deserved it. And my father, mother, sister, brother did it too, so I will do it too.
And then I'll add one more in. If there are no bruises, it's not abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one I just thought of was that you'll be fixed in a few counselling sessions. You'll get over it.
Yeah.
Um,
Then we got victim provoked the abuse.
Yeah.
One of them. Abuse can only be physical, counts as physical. Only adults and not children. There's another myth.
yeah. Yeah. So the root causes we pretty much covered off everything already, but there is a big one, and a lot of Brene Brown's findings have come to show that it's all based around shame, or it's predominantly based around shame and the emotion of shame. Our clients are anyone and everyone touched by family violence, whether it be victim, perpetrator, adult, child, or different communities within the communities. Supports we've pretty much covered off. and the worldview / community view.
Did anyone cover off on like the cultural, language, or community support? So like interpreting or translating services or First Nation led services for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders as well. I'm not sure that was said before, but we had a bit of discussion about that as well.
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
So the worldview or the community view tends to be that it's frowned upon and it's taboo, and who are we to be behaving this way? But when you actually look at it under a microscope, it's a bit of an ignorance is bliss attitude. If it's not happening to me, it's not happening. We want to stay out of people's business, so we don't say anything. Was mentioned that often we don't say anything because we're scared we've got it wrong. And we're scared to say anything because we don't want to become a victim to someone else's violence. If we witness something in the shops or something like that, we don't call it out because we don't want to then become the target ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, all really good points around there. And gosh, I like that you raised the shame. Even after someone shares the story, there's shame because I feel judged or where we're going to go from there. It can be that the perpetrator can have the mindset of, well, this is how I grew up and that's not that bad. My parents stayed together. Why would you leave? That kind of thing. So there can be some confusion around it. It's surprisingly not everybody thinks what they're doing is abuse. And so they could be going through a life event, and that life event can be triggering for them. And then from there, they're acting out in a way that's unhealthy for them and unhealthy for those that they care about. And so it can seem like we're not getting on, but especially when we go to First Nation cultures, a lot of the men feel shame in that I should be able to look after, my partner. So there's shame in that, but they are often also the victim of that abuse. And so it's a sense of failure, even though if they are the perpetrator, they may not understand. So Rabbit.
Yeah, just coming from an older demographic group, I think too that in the olden days, like you were more likely to call someone out for it, but you did it in a way that it wasn't disrespectful. It turned around. A lot of time a cow would back down and would leave the issue. But I think from my point of view today, I think that it's far more dangerous to become involved in some of these things because of the reaction of the perpetrator to being called out. That's just an observation. I mean, back in the day when someone used to abuse his wife or that, and you'd pull him up and sort of give him a bit of a education. Nowadays that doesn't happen because you call someone out and you don't know what they're going to do, and they're so more likely. You're so more likely to get injured. Put it that way.
The Good Samaritan has risk attached to it as well, doesn't it, Rabbit? But we've got Katie and Lachlan. So Katie, something to add?
Yeah, so question for Rabbit. As you said, back in the olden days, what sort of language would you use to confront them?
So say you're out at a pub or somewhere and a bloke was getting abusive with a female or whatever, you'd get in between them, and you turn around and first of all, especially if you were out with your partner, you turn around and tee it up first, so that listen, when I get between him, you grab her and you go out the back to the toilet or whatever, and then you'd get in front of him and you say, mate, listen, this isn't on. You can't talk to your partner like that. You can't turn around and do that. And I hate to say that quite often if he didn't like what you were saying, things could potentially get physical.
Yeah.
But you knew that you weren't going to get stabbed because back then people didn't carry knives.
I know
so
my dad came home from the pub a few times with a bunch of fives in his face or something from doing exactly what you just said, Rabbit.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting in between and getting the wife out of the way and
You
having a
just
bit
had,
of a
you just had to be smart about it.
Yep.
It's amazing if you're on one side of a table and someone's on the other, they can't get to you.
Thank you for
So
answering that, Rabbit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. So we'll circle up to Lachlan.
Yep, this is going on with Rabbit as well. I think a lot of people these days are scared especially because of social media, because most things get filmed these days. And if that was to go on social media, and if you're working in this sector, they don't know what the full story is. And if you're throwing your hands up in the air, yelling and screaming at this person, it could go the wrong way. On the internet, you've probably done the right thing, but it can look bad and you could be all over the news. So that's another reason why people don't do things these days, I think.
Point. We need to look at the world view, like the community's view, as well as our own. And there can be a dilemma there as well, like that stand-up person step in. The other thing is we can often go into survival mode and we don't always get that luxury of time. So what is our survival mode? Are we fight? Are we flight? Are we freeze? Are we fawn? We don't know what we're going to be like unless we are actually in crisis, or you've been in lots of situations like that where you know enough about yourself where you go, right, I'm fight or I'm flight. And people can stay in the same spot. Flight isn't always physical, can be internalized, that's where their injury is. But Rabbit may know this from that era, but it was only in the late 60s where we changed the laws from rule of thumb. And that expression comes from how thick the husband's thumb was how thick the stick could be to beat the wife legally. So the police would look at the stick and go, yeah, well, you're a big man, so it's a big stick. Yeah, that makes sense. But if and that's where that expression comes from, rule of thumb, which is norm. That's the normal. And we talk about normalizing behavior. So anyone who is aware or domestic family violence conscious around this space will not use that term rule of thumb. And if someone pulls you up for it, it'll be because that is what it's implying. And yet there's no intention behind it. It's just that was a law, and it took a lot to get that law removed as well. So now we talk about coercive control, where it's subtle, psychological, but it took other things like workplace health and safety to have psychological safety in it. It's education and awareness and a campaign. But again, like Di said, there's a lot of shame in the story being out there. But there used to be shame, like what Rabbit's saying, it's not the thing to do. Like you don't treat women like that. That was really what it is. And it said less about a man or a partner for doing that. It wasn't considered what a gentleman would do. But things changed in the 60s with the contraception pill, and then people going out to work and having choices not to be married, but to actually live together. So the Western society struggles with that. And you're going to have a look at what are the social and the political, the economic and the cultural aspects of that when you jump into your research. Rabbit.
Yeah, I think something that in today's society plays a massive role in so many things is social media. Back, 30, 40 years ago, there was no social media as such. And that's not just in relation to a person's behaviours, but it's also in relation to, when you have a look at it, the bullying and harassment, which to isn't that far removed from domestic violence when you think about what one kid or one group of kids can do to another kid. And if we really wanted to look into it, there, and this is probably triggering for some, but the amount of suicides by young kids nowadays because of social media is criminal, because social media drives so many kids to believe there's no way out. This is so bad because of how social media exports an incident to so many people so quickly, where, you know, and we spoke in our group back years and years ago, if two people had a disagreement, they would go around the back of a pub, they'd have a fight, but once one, and there'd be a couple of people go around as referees, once one person became dominant in the fight, that was it. You didn't get to belt the shit out of someone, you didn't get to kick them or whatever. And when that was over, the two people would generally get up, shake hands, go around to the pub and have a beer, you know, but no one knew that fight happened except for them two and the guys that were there. But now, two people go and have a fight, whether or not it's females, males, or whatever, everyone knows that they've had it. Everyone sees it, you know. It's not something that you can deal with and keep it hidden. And then once people do have a fight or disagreement or even, you know, predators that film sexual things and what have you, you know, they end up costing people their lives. And it's terrible. I wish we didn't have social media. No, I'd prefer to go back. It was a lot easier using a chisel and slate to take down notes. You know?
You're really old, Rabbit. No, I'm joking. Yes, I hear you. Well, in the 70s, there was shame in even saying you were a victim because there was a sense of failure in you rather than you must have done something to ask for it. There's two sides to every story, but we know it's a lot more complex than that. Thanks, Rabbit. I appreciate that. And you're right, they're those society shifts. And we have different generations that look at things differently as well. So we have one more group I haven't heard from, but I'm just wondering, is there anyone there that was in a group that wanted to share? Think that something hasn't been covered? Okay. Right.
Can I? Oh,
Sorry,
sorry, Vicky.
Tessa. Yeah, you're right, Tessa.
Oh, that's me, Jocelyn. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Jocelyn.
No, you're right. One of the things that you wanted, like that you touched on, was the mandatory reporting. So I work with children. This is something that I've been thinking about, but obviously had all of those tech issues. With the mandatory reporting, like from working in a childcare perspective, when you're talking about abuse and everything like that, you very much have to look at it from an empathetic but objective point of view. You have to understand, okay, I may not know all of the reasons as to why this person's acting this way or reacting, but as a mandatory reporter, you still have to, you know, document in terms of like massive behavioral changes or, you know, massive events that occur. Like if a child tries to escape or, you know, has suicidal ideologies, or it's all about analyzing, but also being empathetic and actually following through with the reporting side of it.
It's a good point you make, Jocelyn, because as youth workers, the young person is the least able to advocate on their own behalf. And so we're in that space. It doesn't necessarily mean the child is removed forever, but where is that imbalance of power? It's oftentimes when you get males that as they're 17 to 19, who may have been the head of the family unit, and then, you know, their parent repartners, and another person comes into that space. They're sacked. their whole identity. Who am I? Where do I fit in? I'm no longer needed. And there's not a lot of transition and shifting around that. And then another person can come in because they're the adult and like, well, I'll take on the role of parent. But with some people are relieved that they're sharing those duties, but not really always thinking about how is that landing with that young person, what messaging is going on there, and have we managed that change, that transition responsibly, and are there very clear boundaries on who does make those decisions? And there may still be another parent outside there that is also part of that decision-making process. So we do oftentimes see young men leave. It can be sort of 14, sleeping rough at 13, 14, couch surfing, friends, maybe finish school, maybe get a job. But then that 17 to 19, it can be very problematic, and it depends on what happens in the family home. It takes one big life event, and then you'll have your garbage can kid. And that garbage can kid will be the one that gets singled out. That the frustrations, the angst, the pain, the psychache will, a low EQ, a low emotional quotient will look for that blame, justify, deny, quit. Quit can mean there's a door. If you don't like it, here's our rules, you go. So it can be, it's complex. It's not just one thing. I liked how Jocelyn approached it, to do that objectively. Our role is not to judge. Our role is to believe and acknowledge what that person is saying. That isn't our job to find out if it's factual or not. The person is presenting what kind of wraparound supports can we put in there. And if they are at risk, if it is recent, then we have to be that voice, that advocate, and walk beside that young person, because at that stage they are trauma impacted, and we need to apply trauma-informed approach around that. And even though they may come in through the door and say, look, I need somewhere to stay, the what else is the work that you will do. But first things first, Maslow's hierarchy of need: shelter, food in the belly, clothes. Those things are pretty important. It's hard to do the next step if we haven't taken care of some of that as well. So let's take a break. I've got 10 to 8. Let's come back at 8:05. We'll shake that off and we'll start moving into that space. I want to thank everybody. First of all, that was rich collective wisdom that we got out of all of those groups. And you are, all thinking along those same lines, but we've got some really different perspectives coming in here, which is great. Tessa?
Hi, I just wanted to mention quickly before we go, I think I was part of the last group that is left, although I wasn't able to really partake in it or my cooking, was however and on the girls that were talking. Yeah. And one point that they made, I think it was Cherise asked, so if there's a client that they have, and something's going on and they make a report to their supervisor and that supervisor doesn't know with them, who can they report to? How do they take it further? Or do they have the right to call police or, go further with that?
Yep.
Beyond their supervisor if they're not doing anything or if nothing is done.
So we'll come to that. Working within the scope of your role, what the requirements are, what the law states, whether you're a mandatory reporter or not. Any member of the public can report, but I'll leave you with this. You have a duty of care that overrides everything. You're working with a minor who is unable to advocate on their own behalf. And as a youth worker, they are your primary client. Okay, so but it's a good point, Tessa. Thank you for that, and we will expand on that as we move through. So let's come back at 8:05 and do our second part of our group. I have another breakout room for you as well. We're going to go job searching and see if you can see yourself in one of those jobs as well. So we'll see you shortly as well. Thanks, Lockie. Do you want to just share that again about that silent space, and then we'll swing over to Jocelyn?
Yeah, for sure. So silence, I think silence is a good thing at times. It may seem awkward at times, but having a silent, even if it's a minute or 2 minutes, it's just showing that you're comfortable with them and getting them to be comfortable with you and building that rapport.
Yeah, thanks, Lockie. Jocelyn.
Just literally doing an extension on that. A lot of the children that I work with in the space that I'm in, they get heavily escalated. So holding that space and actually being like, okay, we don't need to go anywhere. We don't need to move. We don't need to think. We don't need to talk. It's just being in that moment, feeling what is going on, and just being there. It's building that rapport, and it's actually allowing them to be like, oh, okay, this person, even though I've done something or I've reacted to something that has been heavily explosive, this person still wants to be in my space. They still want to know about me. So it's definitely building that rapport, and that silence is 100% key to building any relationship.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Find that regulated space in that window of tolerance for them. Really good point. There's safety in that. Lockie.
Sorry, me again. I've got one thing that I do weekly, and that's I'm lucky to have my own office at the local high school as a youth worker. So on my door, I change a weekly quote each week, and that even starts a conversation of when a kid comes in, he or she reads that quote, and that more than often enough starts the conversation for that session.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great icebreaker as well. Really good. And a jar with some positives in there. It's like, take this and pop it in your pocket, kind of like fortune cookie sort of stuff. So a bit of that serendipity, which is brilliant. Look, the stories can land softly and safely in our space, but we need to be regulated as well. So thanks, Amelia. And we are recording. So I want to, just in this last part of this, I want you to have a think about looking for a job as a youth worker. I think it's important that we come back to that original. So Lockie, when you started your study, you wanted to, would you like to just do a snapshot of, take yourself back to your first part of enrollment, doing Cert for youth work? It's helpful for people who are just starting, because when you're brand new and you sign up, you feel like everyone's ahead of you, but they're not. Nobody has done this unit before. This is brand new content for everybody in this classroom tonight. So if you're brand new, know that this is all new information. What does everybody else know? How to navigate that beast called Accelerate and the learner porthole and log into class and some of those normal type of things that only come with time. Everything is easy when we know how. So Lockie, give us a bit of a walk through your journey, where you started, what you were doing before you did, what was your why, and then how you've kind of traveled in your study journey and where you are now.
Yep. Okay, you've put me on the spot, but that's okay.
I am.
You're good at that. Now, my last job was I live in the Barossa Valley, so I worked at a winery. I worked there for 11, almost 12 years. So, and I wanted to do youth work. I wanted to do youth work for a long time, probably over 10 years. I wanted to do youth work. I just never felt that I was old enough or had the life experience. That was my reasoning of not doing it, because I didn't think a 24, 25-year-old should be doing that role at a high school or anywhere. So, and then 12 years later, I thought I would get out of my comfort zone and apply at Hayter. And what I did was every Wednesday I took long service leave from work, and that was my study day. And then I had done, I think, 4.5 months of study and applied at the local high school. And then I didn't think I'd even get an interview. I just wanted to get an interview just to see what I was prepared for, because the high school youth worker job was in my 3-year goal. I wanted that job in 3 years' time. When I started studying, I thought I'd have to finish studying first. Got an interview, and then I actually got the role. So I'm still currently studying and working in youth work. Probably the main reason why I started studying was I've been through a breakup, long-term breakup, and then my father unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago now, so a year before I started studying, and that kind of kicked me into gear as well. Like, I want to make a change, and I was just going to work and receiving the paycheck, and that's what I was going to work for. I wasn't enjoying it or anything like that. So I wanted to do something I enjoy, and yeah, I'm not looking back and absolutely loving it, and yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, that's great, and you'd be good at it. And also there was other things that you brought over into that role too, you know, like you were involved in sport, so you could see the potential there. And I think, you know, like the timing has to be right for the individual as well, too, you know, like when we do this, I will say that I used to think maybe I'm too old to be doing it now, after 27 years, but your clients will tell you, you know, so I was old enough to be their auntie, old enough to be their mother. I'm old enough to be their grandmother now, but they're very comfortable with me in that young people are not going to judge us if we're not going to judge them. So that respect, that doesn't matter what age you are in that space, that I'm here, I'm present, that unconditional, compassionate inquiry. I'm curious about it. What's been happening here? What's happening for you? So I think it's important.
I'll add one more if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thanks, Lockie.
So actually one of the modules was community service, and I did a community service project, and it was about cooking in the local footy club, and I'm actually got that, and it's starting in a couple of weeks. So even me doing that in this class, I'm actually doing that outside as well. So that's pretty cool, I think. So
yeah.
So what I'm doing is, I'm looking after the under 15s and under 17s local footy club. I'm the youth worker, volunteering youth worker there. So if they've got any issues or anything like that, they can come to me. Just as a volunteer role, just to network as well in the community. And on a Tuesday, I will be taking 3 kids from the under 15s, 3 kids from the under 17s that normally wouldn't mingle together, and I'll take them in the kitchen and pretty much tell them what they should be eating on a Friday night before footy, like carb loading, a pasta or chicken breast and broccoli and healthy stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to that. So yeah. And my biggest thing with feedback at the moment is, if they're coming back, you must be doing something right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. That's great. Thanks. So our next breakout room is exactly this. I want you to look for a job, and I want you to go to any of those job platforms. You don't have to wait, and that's what Lachlan's saying, is that you don't have to wait till you get your piece of paper to be looking for this work. It's good to go for the interview, but let's just do this softly. You might have a different deadline that you're working to, but you're going to be doing work placement as well with your studies, and some of you may be in work placement already, but we need to be looking at work placement as an equal footing. Yes, you've got assessments to do in work placement, but you're interviewing them. You're having a look at their service model. Is this something that I'm interested in doing as well? So if at about 50% through your studies, we'll automatically flag that we want you to be looking at work placement, and we will help you find that. But you need to start thinking, where do I want to go and do this? See you, Jocelyn. Thanks so much for tonight. And you'll get your recording. So I'm going to pop everyone into just 2 breakout rooms. And I want you to get on your phones or use your devices. And I want you to find a job. And the only thing I want you to bring back into this space is, what do you think the soft skills are? Not the qualification, not the day-to-day, but reading it, what do you think they're looking for? Because when you go for a job interview, what are they thinking about? They're thinking about, will our clients get on with you? Will they be comfortable with you? So I want you to look at the positions and have a look at what the soft skills are. Don't let the qualification or the years of experience get in the way. Don't be your own barrier. Thanks, Kirsten. So, and happy Easter to you too. So I'm going to pop you into 2 breakout rooms. I'll pause. Just while everybody's jumped into the breakout room, what I wanted to do was just a quick summary around what everybody had spoken about. So the context of domestic family violence, we've spoken about different genders, different socioeconomic groups, educated, uneducated, ages and stages. And then what are the legal and ethical considerations around that mandatory reporting, the imbalance of power, your role as a youth worker, and what we must do. In task 1, there are questions. And so I've just chosen item 1 or question 1 in there. Our considerations sit around the safety and well-being. That is our priority for that young person. And then every person has the right to live free from violence and abuse. What is the community reaction and assistance? We've spoken about that, what people may have done historically and what they may not do now because the risk is heightened. Organisations, dedication to meeting the client's needs and upholding their rights. So we are advocating and we're support workers. We may go to court with the client. We may be just at that very intake and assessment, and we may be an information person where we'll just say, look, it's not a service that we do, but there's others, and we'll walk beside you while you access those services. What's your organisation's dedication to giving agency to people who are impacted by domestic and family violence? And that's what DFV stands for, domestic family violence. And then another question sits around domestic and family violence is widespread and complex, and we spoke about that. Individuals involved in domestic family violence at any level are physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and or financially affected. And this is in your questions, and it wants you to write in the other column, what are your thoughts around that? And we've shared that tonight collectively. So abuse having a significant social and an economic cost to the community. I gave you decades old data. You may want to explore that further, but it has loss of productivity in the workplace, greater use of police services, greater use in requiring housing, greater use in the health service sector, and greater use in the court systems. You may think of some others. So all domestic and family violence is unacceptable. And when we're working with someone who may be identified as the offender, we need to talk about, how do you think your partner's coping with that at the moment, to try and get them to sit outside of whatever it is that's driving at the moment where they're not able to cope. And those who use violence should take responsibility for their behaviour. So it isn't something where it's opinion-based, it's a crime. And it's a violent crime. And then they have scales of that violent crime. People should be provided with access to a behaviour change program as one element of ensuring the safety of the people they have used violence against. However, just leading into this, Lockie mentioned that, yeah, if people keep turning up, you must be doing something right. The very fact that that client has walked in through the door, they're either mandated to do that, means someone has made them do that. You must attend a program and work with a worker. Or they're checking you out to see if they can trust you with their thoughts and their feelings, their doubts and their shame, and wanting to know that you're not going to judge them in that space, but you are there to support them. And what could be a mystery to them, you may have clarity. And over time, we do that in a safe, supported, and of course, a supervised environment. So the type of work that we could do is assessment work, individual casework where we're seeing someone for more than one session. It may be court support around domestic family violence. It could be the person that has to go to court because they're named. And it could also be the person who is the victim survivor. Both parties are involved in that, and both parties can take out a protection order. And parties can stay living under one roof, but they have that behavioural order. Community development and programs. So we're not always going to have a young person come in, sit down and talk about this. They may talk around this topic. So we're engaging, we're establishing trust, we're giving them other types of things to focus on rather than the trauma that they're experiencing. But we do need to assess the risk. Is this something that's happening to you right now? What is your plan? And then referrals. And then maybe when we come back out of the breakout room, we'll ask, can we think of anything else? Looking at what a job might be as well. So that's where everyone is at the moment in the breakout room for 15 minutes. Record. So I'm just bringing everybody back in from our breakout room, and our discovery session was around looking through jobs. What jobs might be of interest, and then what are the soft skills around that as well. Open that up. Tony, question?
Vicky, we have a bit of an issue. We found a few jobs and we're all coming to live with you. It's relocate to Bundaberg.
Okay. Well, it is a big empty house these days with all adult children gone in bar one. So,
That's all right. We'll fix that one up.
Western Australia, the jobs are in there.
Yeah.
Plenty of room, but yeah.
The looks of it, I have to go to Western Australia from Melbourne. There's a lot of jobs in Western
Bundaberg has we're very big in community service sector, but it's interesting how sometimes politically that can be like, well, we were chosen one of 3 locations for the cashless debit card. So yes, here we are doing things really well, but also being punished for it. Like, oh, we throw so much money into it around community services, but we're very strong advocates. Like we've even got a free legal service called Bundy Street Law. I sit on their board, and that is to help people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness.
Cool.
That's to show them how to advocate with real estates and bond loans and, you know, talking to the Department of Housing and putting their case forward because they're not always able to represent themselves as well.
That's awesome.
It is. It's really good. And then there's a very strong volunteer base, and I still volunteer in my community, which I like doing it as part of it. But I think when you've got a skill, we pay it forward. A bit like Lockie's doing that back in the footy club, but in another way. And they'll see him differently rather than how they saw him before. So our study gives us the confidence to be able to step into that space. So let's have a look at where we are with this in coming out of our breakout room. And this is what I asked everybody to do. Youth workers in that. So we had 15 minutes and you went into your breakout room, you had a look for a job opportunity. And then this is where I want us to go, what skills will be necessary, what knowledge should we possess, and then, of course, at the bottom, what did you notice where it said what qualifications were required, and was there anything else that you think is essential? But in this space, this really is about making sure that we know what the soft skills are. That bit you are 100%. I don't know why that happened. Oh. I don't know why that happened. Don't leave text stuff with me, guys. All right, but it's soft skills I want to know. So who would like to share what jobs they were looking at? See something that caught your attention?
Or one. It's a youth worker for eye care, and it's support growth and nurtured independence, and it's at the Julia Gillard Community College.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Terrific. So I encourage you to get familiar with those job sites and downloading position descriptions, having a look at your own resume and going, what skills can I transfer over? What are the things that I'm doing to head towards that goal? Diana.
I have to remember to turn on my mic. I just had, we had a really good discussion in our room, but I've just looked up quickly specific jobs, and one that kind of appealed to me was a family violence support worker for Refuge Victoria, and just being able to assess information quickly for key points to determine their risk and action plan, having a network of community service contacts, professional and social, familiarity with health professionals and services and service booking skills, so helping them with Centrelink, childcare, bank, maternal health, so life skill specifically, and then home skills, laundry, cleaning, pantry, things like that. So real life skills.
Yeah. And did any of that make you go, I've got a gap, or I've got some of those things already?
I have some of those things already, but the main things that I don't have yet, I don't work in the industry yet, is the network of service contacts, professional and social. So I could probably think of a few people, but certainly wouldn't be a broad network.
No, but that's what Task 2 will do for you. That's your research project. Make that about your local area. Don't just treat it like it's an assessment. Build a portfolio. What are all those free call 1800 numbers, those 24/7s? YB Blue has an online chat for young people to go to around domestic family violence. Black Dog. Find out what's in your local area. That's what I want your research to do. It's easy for us to say, oh, Headspace or some of the regulars. What's in your postcode? If a client walked in through the door, what do you know about that? Even go out into your local area and just say, hey, I'm studying. I wanted to just come in and grab some of your brochures. Centrelink is a great one-stop shop for that. We all leave our brochures there. Up at probation and parole, leave our brochures there. In the police stations, leave our brochures there as well. So don't let that be the gap. Fill the gap yourself in this particular one, task 2. Great.
Thank you.
Somebody else see a job and like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Vicky?
Yeah, hi.
Welcome
Yeah,
through.
I just saw there was a youth worker at a local council. And it was mainly talking about, supporting and engaging programs, creating safe spaces for the children. And I just thought of my role at the moment because I work in a school environment. So some of the personal attributes that they were talking about on their ad, I kind of, could relate or put myself there because I use some of those attributes already within my job. So yeah, that was something that, kind of stood out for me.
Yeah, good. And a nice transition for you out of education into local government, probably a broader one where you may have a greater reach around some young people as well. So that's good. So the soft skills are the ones that we're looking at, rather than don't worry about the piece of paper, that will come.
That's right, because I wrote down, some of the soft skills were obviously being a strong communicator, being empathetic, a good listener, obviously being positive, supportive, which I kind of do in my role at the moment as well. And I think, I do a lot of those, and I feel I am a very compassionate and empathetic person. So
wonderful. And that's endorsed through feedback about your work, and like Lockie said, people just keep turning up. So that may be all you get, but that is fine to measure. So Lockie, what would you like to add?
I've actually got my notes from when I went for my youth worker role, so I'll go through those. In my interview, I really pushed that about community, especially working at a high school, about like my involvement in the community and volunteer work and stuff like that. So that was like doing local work for the footy club or the local lawn bowls club. I've done volunteer work at a disability centre as well. So I definitely talked about that, talked about empathy, passion, effective communication, active listening, ability to build trust, teamwork, leadership, conflict, problem solving, patience, time management, and also I talked a little bit about note taking as well, especially working in a school. So I made sure I mention that as well. And they're all things you can work on without getting a qualification.
Yeah, that's right. That you're in control of now, and building that, you're flexing that muscle in that space. And a lot of people who are driven to do this work will find that people will naturally come and tell you or share things with you, and you're that listener anyway. So intrinsically it's there. It's about just honing that skill, or at least acknowledging that you do already possess a lot of that already. So when we do your skills assessment, none of it is about the story of the person. It is all about, I observe the learner use positive body language. I observe the learner use respectful language. I observe the learner use active listening. I observe the learner come in with strength-based approach. So that's what you're being assessed on, not your knowledge around all the extra, the micro skills or the soft skills for a job. That's what your skills assessment is about. So yes, you do have to practice the story and wrap your head around it, but only to be able to get and understanding, and so that you're not asking them, so why are you here? You know, it's like, what would you like to get out of your time together today? Yep, that's something we can do. Or it isn't something we can do, but I can walk beside you until you're connected to the right service. And that's what a youth worker will do. Or they'll come into a program with you and it will be something completely different, but you're going to be putting in good, healthy professional boundaries as well.
Also, in that interview, I also looked up the Newry High School. That's where I am, Newry High. And looked up what programs they do as well and did research on those programs. And I didn't ask them about that. I told them about what programs they do and that. So showing initiative as well. And yeah, because a winery program. So I used to work in a winery. So that was also my line of like one of my pictures as well was saying I can help out in the winery with the kids and things like that. So also do research about that place as well.
Yeah, fabulous. That's great. Sophia, something to add?
I already spoke about this in the breakout room, so I'll keep the first part brief, but we didn't go through the soft skills, so I might just do that quickly. So I had residential support worker, which is what I'm currently doing. So the soft skills for that is the ability to communicate effectively, build rapport, handle complex situations with empathy and patience, life and home skills. And then the other one I had was child safety officer, which is something that I am hoping to progress to. So with that one, active listening, organization skills, service booking skills, you need an extra qualification for that one. So you need a bachelor degree in human services, social work, psychology, or relevant field. But yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Sophia. And of course, your Cert 4 with your professional skills will give you a minimum of 4 units credit at uni.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah, so that's a given. As long as it's in the field similar, so social work, along those lines. If you do a diploma, it's 8.
Yeah, okay. Great.
So just to give you that idea, that and some experience, whether it's paid or unpaid, makes no difference. So volunteering is of value. Picking a target group that's a little bit outside of what you would normally do. But there's a strong demand for youth residential and NDIS space. That's SIL, the supported independent living, working with young people who are actually under the legal framework of child safety or child protection, depending on where you are in your state or territory. And then those independent living skills, getting ready to transition once they turn 18. In Queensland, we walk beside people who have been institutionalised to come through up until they're 24, because that's how we view a young person. But some places, some states and some branches will say, happy birthday, on your 18th, you're now officially homeless. That's it, we're done. And there can be no contact, especially if it's foster families. So the residential housing has put some structure in there, whereas once it would have looked different. So residential housing used to be decades ago, and Rabbit will be able to share some of that as well, is that they were larger group homes where there could be over 100 people. The home that myself and my siblings grew up in, there were 400 girls in that, and there were different ages and stages coming through that as well. So when you were 16, you had to look after and bath and do all the little kids and things like that. But then they were also going off to secretarial school and learning how to get an income. And because it was a church-based home, they would often go out into families, or the church community, the parishioners would try and help them find work. That was an informal process where it was run by the churches, but of course they've collapsed those. It doesn't mean that the churches don't have funding to run these, but they come in under a different name. So Catholic Care is still the Catholic Church. St Vincent de Paul is still the Catholic Church. Mission Australia, Mission Employment, it is still faith-based. So it just is a different branding around it. And most of the churches all have funding to deliver those social services around it. So I work in an organisation that is non-political, non-sectorial, non-religious. We don't impose that upon any of our young people, but I haven't got anything to say against that in a negative way, as long as it's safe, supported and supervised for a young person. But that's an era, you know, we've had the Royal Commission, there's certainly enough written about group homes for people to be able to look at, but those people grew up and then they became parents, then their children became parents, and that intergenerational trauma of unhealed and the imprint around what is that love language, who am I, where do I fit in, that's how we view domestic and family violence. So look up those spaces when you do task 2. When you do your research, have a look at the ages and stages around domestic family violence. It can even go back to the 1700s, but in that era, it did happen with a particular group, but now this is so much more widespread. Once it was unacceptable and others would keep people in check. However, that rule of thumb only got removed from law in the 60s, and they shut down the group homes in 1968. They were all wrapped up by then. So, but where did people go? And who went into group homes? Children who were victim survivors of maybe the partner had, the wife had died and the father couldn't look after the children, or when you get groups like perhaps our family unit, veteran PTSD, got their counselling at the RSL over the bar, and alcohol is a depressant. So initially they feel okay, you're welcome in the RSL because you've been to war and you've got your people, who am I, where do I fit in? However, trauma impacted parents will create an unsafe environment for their children. So people who couldn't cope, then they would place their children in a home. If you become a state ward in that era, you could not be released from that. So you couldn't go into, you couldn't be adopted. So while my little sister was 6 months old, I was 2. And then I had an older sister and I had a brother that went to a boys' home as well. So it's a different era. Look into what that might be like, and then have a look also of what you would like to see it look like in the future. I think we've come a long way and it's good, but I think we've got a long way to go as well. So I want to say thank you to everybody for that, for tonight. Let me pause. Great. So welcome back, everybody. Just where we left everything was people went into the breakout room. We did a little bit of job search, and we even had some homework of what we're going to be doing next week, just to bring up a public story around domestic family violence that hit the media. What's your thoughts around that? But mostly so that next week I can show you how to debrief, do some self-care. You may have 5 clients back to back in one day, and each of them may have quite a high-risk story. So when we're working in this space, we need to make sure that we know how to unpack that, how to move on, write our file notes, and then be able to get ready and be fully present for our next client. But I wanted to just wrap up some of our other slides. So you will get a full recording of the whole 3 weeks with just me, without live class, and I'm breaking down what each of the slides mean. And then also I take you over to have a look at what assessments are there and just walk through that. But for this one, what I wanted to do is just give you a few slides and talk you through the content week 1, task 1, and then week 2, task 2, and week 3 will be the practitioner skills role play. But you can progress quickly if you want to. So just know that when you're in this space, there are 3 different scenarios in the role plays. Some people will do them live in class on the 3rd week, the final week, and you'll have the benefit of watching them do that. It is not an assessor-led role play, so I don't need to be in that space. However, you can network with some of your peers from class. When you go in a breakout room, that's where you find out if you can be part of the WhatsApp group or to go over to Discord. And in Discord, you'll meet other learners who are looking to do that exact unit. So this unit is what we call a core unit, which means that every single course at HADA, all 6 qualifications around the scope, and there's 12 altogether because we have Cert 3s in early childhood and individual support. They do this unit. We also have Cert 4 youth work, mental health, AOD, and community services. They all do this unit. And then we have diploma of youth work, community services, AOD, and mental health. They all do this exact unit. So this is what we call core, which means a bit like how we were discussing tonight, this will impact anybody in our community. So you're required to know this one particular unit. Okay, so we jumped out, we spoke about what skills were necessary, and then what we should possess, what we can build on to take that mystery out. And how are we going to work with our clients who have either experienced, witnessed, or survived domestic family violence? So our clients may be an individual, so we may have one-on-one, but it could be a group, survivors and victim survivors, and the users of violence and families. So some people will imply that it's a perpetrator. If there is a protection order, it remains a civil matter. It is only when someone breaches that order or the police believe it was a serious violent crime would it become a criminal matter. But mostly protective orders are around the civil court, still heard in court, but it means that you can accept the order but admit no guilt. But if you have an order and you breach that order, then that goes in through the criminal matter and under the domestic family violence laws. So our own and others' values and philosophies, so safety, well-being, free of risk and harm, and our sense of community, that domestic family violence is unacceptable every single time. And then responsibility for behaviours that person, like, that's not okay. And it is a crime if you assault or abuse somebody, but we need to know what is abuse, because some people will go, well, I wasn't hit, but the damage was psychological. And then what are the needs of support and what are the rights in that space? Empowerment or agency to be able to advocate on your own behalf, and then widespread and complex. We talked about that in our bigger breakout room at the beginning. What's the impact of that? We talked about the economic cost, and then what are some of the devastating effects that do impact not only our clients, but us as workers hearing these stories. So in the video that you receive the full course, which I pre-recorded, and it is me doing that one. So it's youth and social work domestic violence. There's a video in your slides to watch as well. It talks about that in your role. And so I want you to watch that, and also the one in Discord. And if you're not sure, contact learner support officers or email me and I will send you out some of those resources. And it is another trainer, Blake, who takes the certificate for in community services. And sometimes we will share and swap around depending on what the topic is. We put people in strength space, but Blake plays the client and I play the worker. And it is around this unit, the CHCDFV001. And it's around task 3, and it's the third client. So you've got 3 separate role plays to do. But you can go in and see Blake and I doing that. And then after Blake leaves, then I talk about the assessment, what we're looking for, how we're going to mark you as well. So that is one that, this one that we're doing, that's one that I have unpacked already. Just to give you an example, but there's some great resources in there. Cheyenne's done one of our other trainers where it's all the do's and don'ts of role plays as well. So that's a pretty good one. They've just popped up. There's a lot there, and some of them are really, really helpful. So it's that, here's one we've prepared for you earlier to have a look at and then go, oh, okay, I'll give that a go. But you get 3 attempts, and sometimes if you submit a role play, you might be almost there and we'll say, do you know what, we just want a part 2 where I want you to talk about that. But if you're new to this space and you would like to have someone support you, please reach out. You can get support from Hader, and sometimes I will jump in that space and I'll coach somebody on how to get over those nerves as well. It's not a comfortable place for me either. And I just found that I had to lean into it and deal with it. And then the more I did, the better I got. Okay. So just keep those values and principles in mind, your own, your clients, and the organisation's reputation. Next week is why I wanted to do some self-reflection and some self-care and reviewing around how did I feel after I heard that story and did that impact me? Vicarious trauma is when we read something or we overhear something where it's indirect, but we can be impacted by that. We get performance feedback, so we talk to our line manager. We get debriefing so we can unpack it. We can even get EAP, which is employee assistance programs, depending on who you work with and for. And then also some ongoing training and development with staff. That's our professional development. So it is, even though you're going to get a qualification, it is always that ongoing learning. Legislation changes, different models come in, and we go and attend those as well. So if you are looking for extra professional development, then just make sure that you reach out, and I'm happy to send you some of those things which are helpful. And then supervision is when you can unpack everything. I have the same person who provides professional supervision for me and has done now for 24 years, the same person. Never met them face to face. It's either been over the phone or it's now in Zoom. We meet virtually. They're in a completely different state. And it's good to have someone that you want to talk about what you think you did well and what you think you'd like to do differently. And their role is to make sure you keep that work-life balance in place. Or if there's a pattern coming through, they might say to you, I think maybe your professional boundary is blurring. That's hitting home hard personally. That's your accountability buddy. But it's done in a professional framework. Also to make sure that your own mental health and well-being are okay. So I send everyone into the breakout room and ask what are the domestic family violence services in your own area and what kind of development training that might be available. There's a few different programs when you're doing your research. That brings us over into task 2. We look at the culture, interpreters, someone raised that in our discussion, which was good, child abuse and mandatory reporting, some around the criminal side. You can be more isolated, rural, remote, and regional. Dual diagnosis, where it's actually mental health and domestic family violence. Trauma impacted people, it's often like that. PTSD lessens the response or the reaction. However, PTSD is the body keeps score, so it can be triggered, but the impact of that may not be as severe after years. But you know, as an advocate or in the courts, I still work with someone 6 years later after the more serious court cases. Mental health issues, and then of course the ripple effect afterwards, how that impacts your own family when you go home at the end of the day, while you're studying. If something, you hear a story and it's sitting on your mind, what do we do with that? So I want to speak more about that reflective practice next week, but definitely our clients' mental health. So we talk about the impact economically, we spoke about that, the cost to community, and the victims and survivors often have to go into debt or get a hardship payment. It can be difficult because they're looking for accommodation. I shared a lived experience story around changes in legislation, community awareness, perception, and then what are the triggers for change. So it can take a royal commission, the group homes being shut down, those stories, they're the triggers for change. And why we do what we do now and why it is different to what it used to be 50 years ago or more. We spoke about myths. We discuss those, the legal and ethical, psychological safety around workplace health and safety. If you are trauma impacted, you may be stressed or under duress, and you may not be able to do your job, which could make you unsafe and your peers unsafe in the workplace. Your work role boundaries need to be professional and healthy, and the rights and responsibilities of a client, the rights and responsibilities of us as that worker. You have a duty of care. That's where mandatory reporting will come in. If we are working with a parent and we know there's children who are exposed to this, then we have a duty of care that overrides the parent's need. Of course, it would be better for the children to be kept with the parent. However, if the parent is not keeping that child safe, then we absolutely have to respect that child's human rights, because they do not have a voice and they cannot advocate on their own behalf. So the adults are making those decisions about their safety, and they could be decisions that are impacted by their own experience rather than what the parent responsibility is. And then, of course, discrimination. Mandatory reporting, privacy and confidentiality and disclosure. And then how do we write down the facts that sit around that? So we're not there. All we can write is the client stated. And we don't have definites. We just say, perhaps we could explore that further. It has the potential to offer some opportunities, but we know nothing for certain. And that's in our language when we write our file notes. And you're going to research a story, a public interest story, a little bit more around our target group. And that's why I want you to go to a fairly high profile one if you can. If you're not sure about one and you're interested, there's a story about school chaplain, gym owner, domestic family violence. That is a very public one. And I can speak to that one because it is public knowledge, but it's also that particular story and that victim survivor's journey in domestic family violence. And I'll put that into our final slide. who is our target group? What are our work practices? Our own values and philosophies around domestic family violence work, and then the community's perception, and then of course our client's perception. And then what's our support processes for the client and ourselves? What's the legal and the ethical? And they are the issues that we covered tonight. So let me just pause for us there. Okay, just in wrapping up our night, just do our final session around our homework, which I get everyone to do, to think of that high profile. So I want to put up one if you can't find something between now and next week. So our summary for our class was we spoke about our target group, our work practices, our values, philosophy, what supports there, the legal, ethical. Next week, I want us to unpack what our self-care is like when we're researching, working in that space, getting ready to do some one-on-one with some people who are experiencing domestic family violence. So just one, we spoke tonight about services and supports. One of them was Eat on Place, and I took everyone over to the website. But this is a high profile public one as well. It's one of the ones in Queensland, but just this one here is a story, and that was around the offender. I can use the word and term offender because the offender was charged with serious violent crime assault, and that was downgraded from strangulation, which often the courts will do if that person will plead guilty, and the reasons around that. So that particular one was a local one, but you may have one in your state or territory. And then because there was the social media and the public side of things was really quite horrific, they responsibly, the media did come back in, community members, Eat on Place, a couple of us jumped in, and to get the mother's story around how hard it is to have this out there in that public arena. And it was very challenging. So we'll share that. You may have one that you can think of, but there's also some other really good resources. I'll be interested to see what we bring back into class and share in that space. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll see everybody next week.